Sometimes the most extraordinary transformations begin in the most ordinary moments. Picture a man pushing a mop down empty hallways at 3 in the morning, humming softly to himself in a language no one expects him to know. His uniform bears the name Marcus, and to everyone around him, he's just another invisible worker keeping the world clean while others sleep. But what happens when the invisible becomes visible? When a single moment of courage reveals years of hidden dreams and secret learning? When a wealthy woman's curiosity about a foreign phrase unlocks a story so powerful it changes not just one life, but creates ripples that touch an entire community? This is the true story of Marcus Thompson, a single father from Detroit, whose late-night study sessions and unwavering determination led to an encounter that would challenge everything people assumed about him. It's about the dreams we carry in silence, the strength we find in our darkest hours, and how sometimes the most unexpected connections can open doors we never knew existed. In a world where people are often judged by their appearance or job title, Marcus was about to prove that brilliance can shine from the most unexpected places. His journey reminds us that behind every uniform, every quiet person going about their work, there might be a story waiting to change the world. Are you ready to discover how a simple conversation in Dutch became the key that unlocked a future no one saw coming? Marcus Thompson pulled his beat-up Honda into the parking lot of Meridian Corporate Center at exactly 10:47 p.m., just like he had every weeknight for the past 4 years. The towering glass building stood against the Detroit skyline like a monument to success that felt worlds away from his own reality. At 32, Marcus had grown accustomed to being invisible in places like this, where million-dollar deals were made during the day while he cleaned up the remnants at night. He grabbed his worn backpack from the passenger seat, careful not to let his notebooks spill out. Inside were language books, grammar guides, and pages of handwritten notes in Dutch, German, and French. Most people would find it strange that a janitor spent his break time studying European languages, but Marcus had learned long ago not to share his dreams with others. Dreams had a way of being crushed when they didn't fit people's expectations. The security guard, Tommy, barely looked up from his smartphone as Marcus badged in. "Evening, Marcus. Building's mostly empty tonight, except for some big-shot meeting on the 20th floor. They ordered fancy catering and everything." Marcus nodded and headed to the service elevator. The 20th floor housed Henderson Global Investments, one of the most prestigious firms in the building. He'd cleaned their offices many times, but rarely encountered anyone working late. Tonight felt different, though. As the elevator climbed, Marcus could hear his 8-year-old daughter Aaliyah's voice in his head from their phone call earlier. "Daddy, did you practice your Dutch today? Remember, you promised to teach me some words when you get really good at it." Aaliyah lived with his ex-wife Sarah in Chicago, and their weekly phone calls were the highlight of Marcus's existence. Sarah had moved there 2 years ago with her new husband, taking Aaliyah with her. The custody arrangement gave Marcus every other weekend, but his work schedule and limited finances made those visits increasingly rare. Learning languages had started as a way to distract himself from the loneliness, but it had grown into something more, a secret hope that maybe someday these skills might open doors to a better life where he could provide more for his daughter. The elevator dinged at the 20th floor, and Marcus stepped out with his cleaning cart. The hallway was dimly lit, except for the light spilling out from the conference room at the end of the corridor. He could hear voices speaking in hushed tones, occasionally rising with what sounded like frustration or excitement. Marcus had learned to time his cleaning around important meetings, staying far enough away to avoid disrupting business, but close enough to maintain his schedule. He started with the bathrooms at the opposite end of the hallway, methodically working his way through each office. Marcus took pride in his work, even if others didn't notice. Each desk he dusted, each trash can he emptied, each window he cleaned, was done with care. His mother had raised him to believe that any job worth doing was worth doing well, and he carried that lesson with him even during the loneliest nights. Around midnight, the voices from the conference room grew louder. Marcus could make out several distinct accents as he cleaned the offices nearby. They were definitely Americans, but also what sounded like European voices. He tried not to eavesdrop, but years of cleaning offices had made him accidentally aware of many conversations. Most of the time, it was just background noise about quarterly reports, client meetings, or office politics. Tonight was different. As Marcus worked closer to the conference room, he began to recognize some of the languages being spoken. There was definitely English, but also German and what sounded like Dutch. His heart rate quickened slightly. After 3 years of studying Dutch through online courses, library books, and language apps, he rarely heard it spoken by native speakers. The meetings seemed to be getting more intense. Marcus could hear papers shuffling, chairs scraping against the floor, and voices becoming more animated. He tried to focus on his work, but his ear kept picking up Dutch phrases that he actually understood. Someone was talking about problemen met de contracten, problems with contracts. Another voice mentioned Nederlandse investeerders, Dutch investors. Marcus finished cleaning the office next to the conference room and was about to move on when he heard something that made him freeze. A woman's voice, clearly frustrated, was saying in Dutch, "Dit is hopeloos. Niemand hier spreekt Nederlands en we hebben deze documenten voor morgenochtend nodig." His heart pounded as he translated in his head. This is hopeless. Nobody here speaks Dutch, and we need these documents by tomorrow morning. For a moment, Marcus stood perfectly still, gripping his cleaning cloth. Part of him wanted to keep walking, to stay invisible as always, but another part of him, the part that had spent countless hours studying Dutch grammar and vocabulary, that dreamed of using these skills someday, urged him to do something he'd never done before. He thought about Elia, about the promise he'd made to himself to build a better life for both of them. He thought about all those nights when exhaustion tempted him to skip his language studies, but he'd pushed through anyway. He thought about the respect in his daughter's voice when she asked about his languages, how proud she seemed that her daddy was learning something special. Taking a deep breath, Marcus knocked gently on the conference room door. The room fell silent. After a moment, a woman's voice called out, "Come in!" Marcus opened the door and stepped inside, immediately feeling the weight of several pairs of eyes on his uniform. The room was elegant, with a long polished table surrounded by leather chairs. 5 people sat around the table, laptops open, documents scattered everywhere. At the head of the table sat a woman in her 50s with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her sharp blue eyes looked at Marcus with surprise but not unkindness. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Marcus said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I'm Marcus, part of the cleaning crew. I couldn't help but overhear that you're having some trouble with Dutch documents." The woman who had been speaking in Dutch looked shocked. She was tall and elegant, probably in her 40s, with the kind of confident bearing that suggested she was used to being the smartest person in the room. "You speak Dutch?" she asked in accented English. Marcus nodded. "Ik spreek Nederlands, ja. Niet perfect, maar ik denk dat ik kan helpen." "I speak Dutch, yes. Not perfectly, but I think I can help." The room erupted in surprised murmurs. The silver-haired woman at the head of the table gestured to an empty chair. "Please, sit down. I'm Victoria Henderson, and this is my company. This is Ingrid Vanderberg from our Amsterdam office." She indicated the tall woman who had been speaking Dutch. Marcus hesitated. "Ma'am, I'm working right now. I don't want to get in trouble." Victoria waved her hand dismissively. "You're not in trouble. If you can help us with this translation problem, you'd be doing us an enormous favor. We've been stuck for hours trying to understand these Dutch legal documents for a merger that needs to be finalized by morning." Still feeling surreal about the situation, Marcus sat down at the conference table. Ingrid slid several documents across to him, her expression a mixture of skepticism and hope. "These are contracts from our Dutch partners," she explained in English. "Some of the legal terminology is very specific, and the online translation tools aren't capturing the nuanced meanings we need." Marcus looked down at the documents, his heart racing. The text was dense, legal, Dutch, much more complex than the conversational Dutch he'd been studying. But as he read through the first paragraph, he realized he understood more than he'd expected. Years of studying grammar, combined with his natural intuition for language patterns, had prepared him better than he'd realized. "This section here," Marcus said, pointing to a paragraph near the top of the first page, "isn't actually about penalties like your translation suggested. It's about goodwill gestures. Basically, it's saying that if there are delays, the Dutch company is willing to offer compensation to maintain the business relationship." Ingrid's eyes widened. She grabbed her laptop and typed rapidly, comparing Marcus's interpretation with her notes. That's completely different from what we thought. If they're offering compensation rather than demanding it, this changes everything about our negotiating position." For the next hour, Marcus worked through the documents with growing confidence. His cleaning cart sat forgotten in the hallway as he helped the team understand complex clauses about liability, profit sharing, and regulatory compliance. Each translation revealed new aspects of the deal that had been misunderstood. Victoria watched Marcus work with growing amazement. "Where did you learn Dutch?" she asked during a break in the translation work. Marcus felt his cheeks warm with embarrassment. "Online courses, library books, language apps. I've been studying for about 3 years now." He didn't mention the real reason, that learning languages had started as an escape from loneliness and had grown into a dream of somehow building a better future for himself and his daughter. 3 years? Ingrid looked incredulous. Your understanding of legal terminology is remarkable for someone who's self-taught. I've seen native speakers struggle with some of these concepts. As they worked deeper into the night, Marcus found himself drawn into strategic discussions about the merger. His translations weren't just literal conversions of words. He was helping the team understand the cultural context behind certain phrases, the implied meanings that could make or break a business relationship. Around 2 a.m., they finished translating the final document. The room was littered with coffee cups and notes, and everyone looked exhausted but relieved. Victoria leaned back in her chair and studied Marcus with obvious curiosity. "I have to ask," she said. "What's your story? How does a janitor end up speaking business-level Dutch at 2 in the morning?" Marcus felt the familiar urge to deflect, to minimize himself and get back to his invisible routine. But something about the genuine interest in Victoria's voice, and the way the entire team had treated him as an equal for the past few hours, made him want to be honest. "I have a daughter," he began slowly. "She's 8, and she's the smartest kid I know. She lives in Chicago with her mum, and I don't get to see her as much as I'd like. Learning languages started as something to keep my mind busy, but it became something more. I guess I hope that maybe someday these skills might help me build a better life for both of us." The room was quiet for a moment. Victoria exchanged a look with Ingrid that Marcus couldn't quite read. "What other languages do you speak?" Victoria asked. "I'm working on German and French too. Not as advanced as my Dutch, but I can handle basic conversations and read most texts." Victoria stood up and walked to the window overlooking the Detroit skyline. Dawn was still hours away, but a few early lights were beginning to twinkle in the distance. "Marcus," she said without turning around, "what would you say if I told you I might have a proposition for you?" Marcus's heart began to race again, but this time with hope rather than nervousness. "I'd say I'm listening." Victoria turned back to face him.
We're expanding our European operations significantly.
We need people who can bridge cultural and linguistic gaps, who understand both the business side and the human side of international relationships.
"Tonight, you've shown me that you have skills that can't be taught in any business school." She paused, seeming to consider her words carefully. "I can't make any promises tonight. There are procedures to follow, backgrounds to check, proper channels to go through. But if you're interested, I'd like to explore the possibility of offering you a position with our international division." Marcus felt like the room was spinning. "Ma'am, I don't have a college degree. I don't have any business experience beyond what happened here tonight." "Some things can be taught," Victoria said with a smile. "Intelligence, work ethic, and genuine cultural understanding can't be. You've demonstrated all three tonight." She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a business card. "Think about it. Call me Monday if you're interested in discussing this further." As Marcus walked back to his cleaning business card clutched in his hand, he felt like he was living in a dream. The hallway looked exactly the same as it had 4 hours earlier, but everything felt different. The building that had always felt like a monument to other people's success suddenly felt like a place where his own future might be possible. He finished his cleaning duties in a daze, his mind racing with possibilities and fears in equal measure. What would this mean for his life? For his relationship with Aaliyah? Could he really transition from mopping floors to international business? Did he dare to hope that his secret dream of using his language skills professionally might actually come true? As Marcus drove home through the empty Detroit streets, the business card on his dashboard catching the light from street lamps, he realized that sometimes the most extraordinary opportunities come disguised as ordinary moments. Tonight, a simple decision to knock on a conference room door had opened a window to a future he'd never quite dared to imagine. The sun was beginning to rise as he reached his small apartment, and Marcus knew that regardless of what happened next, something fundamental had shifted. He was no longer just a janitor who studied languages in secret. He was a man whose hidden talents had been recognized, whose dreams had been acknowledged as valid and valuable. For the first time in years, Marcus Thompson went to sleep believing that anything might be possible. Marcus stared at Victoria Henderson's business card for the entire weekend, turning it over in his hands like a talisman. The elegant cream cardstock with raised lettering seemed to mock him sometimes, reminding him of the vast gulf between his current reality and the possibility it represented. Other times it filled him with a hope so intense it was almost painful. Saturday morning found him at his kitchen table, the card propped against his coffee mug as he researched Henderson Global Investments on his laptop. What he discovered both thrilled and intimidated him. The company wasn't just successful, it was a major player in international finance, with offices in 12 countries and billions in assets under management. Victoria Henderson wasn't just wealthy. She was a legend in the business world. Known for her innovative approach to emerging markets and her reputation for discovering hidden talent. The more he read, the more imposter syndrome crept in. Articles about the company's recent acquisitions mentioned Harvard MBAs, former investment bankers from Wall Street, executives with decades of international experience. What place could a janitor from Detroit possibly have in this world? But then he remembered Thursday night, the feeling of confidence that had grown as he worked through those Dutch documents. The respect in Ingrid Vandenberg's eyes, as she realized his translations were not just accurate but insightful. For those few hours, he hadn't felt like a janitor pretending to belong. He'd felt like exactly the right person for the job. Saturday afternoon brought his weekly call with Aaliyah. He'd been looking forward to it all week, but now he felt torn about what to share. Should he tell her about the potential opportunity? Should he raise her hopes along with his own? "Daddy, you sound different today," Aaliyah said, her 8-year-old intuition picking up on something in his voice. Did something good happen? Marcus smiled despite his nervousness. His daughter had always been perceptive beyond her years. "Maybe, sweetheart. I had an interesting conversation at work this week. Someone was impressed with my Dutch." "Really? Did you get to use it for something important?" "I helped some business people understand some documents from the Netherlands. It felt good to use what I've been learning." There was excitement in Aaliyah's voice when she responded. "That's so cool. I told my teacher that my daddy speaks Dutch, and she said that's really special. Not many people know how to do that." The pride in his daughter's voice strengthened Marcus's resolve. Whatever fears he had about stepping into an unfamiliar world, they were nothing compared to his desire to make Aaliyah proud and to build a life where he could provide better for her future. Sunday evening, Marcus called his mother in Cleveland. Dorothy Thompson had raised 3 sons as a single mother after their father left when Marcus was 12. She'd worked 2 jobs to keep them fed and housed, and she'd instilled in all of them a fierce work ethic and an unshakable belief that they could overcome any obstacle. "Baby, you sound nervous," she said after Marcus had told her about Thursday night. "What's got you worried?" "Mom, what if I'm not good enough? What if I get in there and they realize I don't belong? I don't have the education these people have, the background, the connections." Dorothy was quiet for a moment, and Marcus could picture her in her small Cleveland kitchen, probably preparing her meals for the work week ahead. When she spoke, her voice carried the wisdom of someone who'd fought for everything she'd ever achieved. "Marcus, let me tell you something I learned a long time ago. There are 2 kinds of people in this world. Those who are given opportunities and those who create them. Thursday night, you created an opportunity. You saw a problem, you had a solution, and you had the courage to speak up. That's not luck, baby. That's character." She paused, and Marcus could hear her moving around the kitchen. "You think those fancy business school graduates would have noticed what was happening in that conference room? You think they would have cared enough to interrupt their routine to help? You've been preparing for this your whole life, even if you didn't know it. All those nights studying when you were tired, all those hours practicing languages when you could have been watching TV, that was you investing in yourself." Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. "But what if I fail?" "Then you fail forward," Dorothy said firmly. "Your daddy might not have been much of a father, but he did teach me one thing before he left. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. You've got skills these people need, and more importantly, you've got heart. Don't let fear rob you of a chance to build something better for yourself and my granddaughter." Monday morning arrived grey and drizzly, typical Detroit weather that matched Marcus's nervous energy. He'd barely slept Sunday night, alternating between excitement and terror. He'd written and rewritten what he wanted to say to Victoria Henderson, practicing different versions of the conversation in his head. At 9 a.m. sharp, he dialed the number on the business card. His hands were shaking slightly as he waited for someone to answer. "Henderson Global Investments, how may I direct your call?" "I'd like to speak with Victoria Henderson, please." "This is Marcus Thompson. She asked me to call." "One moment, please." The hold music seemed to last forever. Marcus found himself pacing around his small apartment, second-guessing everything. Maybe he'd misunderstood her invitation. Maybe she'd already forgotten about their conversation. Maybe this whole thing had been some kind of elaborate joke. "Marcus?" Victoria's voice came through clearly, warm and professional. "I'm glad you called. I was hoping you would, Miss Henderson. I wanted to thank you again for Friday night, and to let you know that I'm very interested in discussing the position you mentioned." "Excellent. Are you available to come in for a formal meeting? I'd like to introduce you to some other members of our team and discuss what this opportunity might look like in more detail." They scheduled the meeting for Wednesday afternoon, giving Marcus time to prepare. After hanging up, he realized he faced a problem he hadn't anticipated. What does a janitor wear to a business meeting at one of Detroit's most prestigious investment firms? Tuesday after his shift, Marcus drove to a department store and spent nearly 2 hours trying to find a suit that fit both his budget and his body. He'd lost weight over the past year, stress and long hours taking their toll, so his old interview clothes from years ago hung loose and shabby. The sales associate, a young man named Kevin, seemed genuinely invested in helping Marcus find something that worked. "Big interview?" Kevin asked as Marcus tried on a charcoal grey suit. "Something like that," Marcus replied, studying himself in the three-way mirror. He looked different in the suit, more professional, more confident. But he also looked nervous, and he wondered if that would show in the interview. "Let me guess. You're worried about fitting in," Kevin said with a knowing smile. "I get a lot of guys in here who are making big career moves. Can I give you some advice?" Marcus nodded. "The suit doesn't make the man. It just gives the man confidence to be himself. You've got something they want, or they wouldn't have asked you to come in. Trust that, and trust yourself." Wednesday afternoon, Marcus found himself back in the same building where he'd been cleaning just 6 days earlier. But this time, he walked through the front lobby instead of the service entrance, and he rode the executive elevator instead of the freight elevator. The difference in perspective was startling. Suddenly, he could see the building as visitors saw it, all marble and brass and soaring glass walls designed to impress. The receptionist on the 20th floor, a woman named Janet whom Marcus had seen many times during his cleaning rounds, did a double take when he introduced himself. "Marcus, from the cleaning crew?" "Oh, my goodness, Ms. Henderson told me you'd be coming in. You look so different." Marcus smoothed down his new tie nervously. "Different good or different bad?" Janet smiled. "Different like you belong here. She's ready for you in the conference room." Walking into the same conference room where everything had changed felt surreal. Victoria was there, along with 2 other people Marcus didn't recognize. She stood and extended her hand with a genuine smile. "Marcus, thank you for coming. I'd like you to meet Robert Chen, our Director of International Operations, and Elena Rodriguez, our Head of Human Resources." The handshakes felt firm and professional. Marcus tried to project confidence, drawing on his mother's words and Kevin's advice about the suit, just giving him permission to be himself. "Please sit down," Victoria said, gesturing to the same chair where Marcus had sat while translating documents. "I've told Robert and Elena about Thursday night, but I'd like you to tell them a bit about yourself and your background." For the next 30 minutes, Marcus found himself talking more openly about his life than he had in years. He told them about growing up in Detroit, about his daughter in Chicago, about the long nights studying languages while working to pay the bills. He talked about his dreams of using his skills professionally, about his desire to build a better future for Aaliyah. Robert Chen, a soft-spoken man in his 40s, asked thoughtful questions about Marcus's language abilities and his understanding of European business culture. Elena Rodriguez focused more on his work history and his long-term goals. "I have to be honest with you, Marcus," Victoria said when the formal questions were finished. "This would be an unconventional hire for us. Our typical international associates come from very different backgrounds. But Thursday night convinced me that what we need isn't more conventional thinking." She pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. "Here's what I'm proposing. We have a position opening up in our Amsterdam office in 3 months. It's an associate-level role working with European clients, with a focus on cultural liaison and document review. The salary would be $70,000 to $5,000 a year to start, with full benefits and opportunities for advancement." Marcus's heart stopped. $75,000 was more than twice what he was making as a janitor, and it came with benefits he'd never had access to. "There would be conditions," Victoria continued. "We'd want you to complete some intensive business training over the next 3 months. We'd also need you to achieve formal certification in your Dutch language skills. And eventually, we'd want you to relocate to Amsterdam for at least 2 years." The last part hit Marcus like a physical blow. Amsterdam. 2 years. What would that mean for his relationship with Aaliyah? How could he explain to his 8-year-old daughter that pursuing this opportunity might mean being even further away from her? Elena seemed to notice his reaction. The Amsterdam position would come with relocation assistance, housing allowances, and excellent international schools if you wanted to bring family members with you eventually. Marcus felt his mind racing. Could he and Sarah work out an arrangement where Aaliyah could spend part of her time in Amsterdam? Would Sarah even consider such a thing? How could he pursue his dreams without abandoning his responsibilities as a father? "I can see you're concerned about the relocation aspect," Victoria said gently. "It's a big decision, and I want you to know that we're committed to making this work for your whole family situation. We've helped other employees navigate complex custody arrangements for international assignments." Robert Chen leaned forward. "Marcus, Can I ask you something? What do you want your daughter to learn from watching your life? The question caught Marcus off guard. He thought about Aaliyah's voice on their weekly calls, the pride she expressed when he told her about studying languages, the way she bragged to her teachers about her daddy's special skills. I want her to learn that dreams are worth fighting for, he said slowly. That where you start doesn't have to be where you finish. That education and hard work can open doors, even when those doors seem impossible.
Then isn't this exactly the lesson she needs to see? Robert asked, her father taking a calculated risk, using his skills and talents to build something better.
Marcus looked around the conference room. The same room where he'd been invisible 6 days ago. Now the place where his entire future was being discussed and planned.
He thought about his mother's words about creating opportunities, about Kevin's advice that the suit just gave him permission to be himself, about Aaliyah's pride in his language skills. When would you need an answer? Marcus asked. Take a week, Victoria said. This is a big decision that will affect your whole life. Talk to your family, think it through. But Marcus, I want you to know that we're not doing this as a favor or out of sympathy. We're offering this because we believe you can contribute something valuable to our organization. As Marcus walked back through the lobby, the business card in his pocket replaced by a folder full of job descriptions and benefit packages, he realized that his life had split into 2 distinct chapters. There was his life before Thursday night, when he was just a janitor with secret dreams, and his life after, when those dreams had suddenly become achievable realities. The most extraordinary part wasn't that a millionaire had noticed his talents, it was that she'd seen something in him that he was only beginning to see in himself. The potential not just to use his skills, but to grow them, to build on them, to create a future that could make his daughter proud and secure. Walking to his car in his new suit, Marcus Thompson felt the weight of possibility settling on his shoulders. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure, but for the first time in his adult life, he felt like the author of his own story, rather than just a character reacting to circumstances. The decision he had to make would change everything, not just for him, but for Aaliyah and everyone who cared about them. The question was whether he had the courage to reach for a future that felt almost too good to be true, or whether fear would convince him to settle for the safety of the familiar path. As he drove through Detroit's streets, past the neighborhoods where he'd grown up, and the buildings where he'd worked, Marcus knew that whatever he decided, there was no going back to who he'd been before Thursday night. The man in the rearview mirror was someone new, someone who'd been seen, recognized, and valued for his hidden talents. The only question now was whether he would have the courage to become who that man could be. The phone felt impossibly heavy in Marcus's hands as he prepared to call Sarah. He'd been sitting in his car outside his apartment building for 20 minutes, the engine off, trying to find the right words for a conversation that could change everything. The folder from Henderson Global sat on his passenger seat, bit with possibilities and complications in equal measure. Sarah had always been practical, even when they were married. She'd been the one who balanced their checkbook, who planned for the future, who worried about stability and security. When their marriage fell apart 3 years ago, it wasn't because they'd stopped loving each other. It was because the stress of financial struggles and Marcus's long work hours had slowly eroded what they'd built together. Her marriage to David, a successful engineer in Chicago, had given her the security Marcus had never been able to provide. Their home was in a good neighborhood with excellent schools for Aaliyah. David was kind to Aaliyah and treated her like his own daughter. Marcus had learned to be grateful for this, even when it stung his pride. But now, everything was about to become complicated again. Marcus finally pressed Sarah's number and waited, his heart racing as the phone rang. Marcus? Is everything okay? You don't usually call on Wednesday nights. I'm fine. Aaliyah's fine, right? Of course. She's doing homework in her room. What's going on? You sound strange. Marcus took a deep breath. Sarah, I need to talk to you about something important. Something that could affect our arrangements with Aaliyah. There was a pause, and Marcus could picture Sarah's face, the way her brow would furrow when she sensed a problem approaching. What kind of something? I've been offered a job, a real job, not cleaning. It would mean a significant pay increase, benefits, a real career path. Marcus, that's wonderful. I'm so proud of you. What kind of job? International business consulting, using my language skills. The company is Henderson Global Investments. Even through the phone, Marcus could hear Sarah's intake of breath. Henderson Global was the kind of company that made headlines in business magazines, the kind of place that represented success at the highest levels. Oh, that's incredible, Marcus. I always believed your language studying would pay off someday. What's the catch? There's always a catch with opportunities that good. Marcus's stomach tightened. The position is in Amsterdam, 2 years minimum. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Marcus counted 10 heartbeats before Sarah spoke again, her voice carefully controlled. Amsterdam, as in the Netherlands. Yes. And you'd be living there. Yes. Another long pause. Marcus, what about Aaliyah? What about Aaliyah? You already miss half your visitation weekends because of distance and your work schedule. How would this work? I don't know yet, Marcus admitted. That's why I'm calling. I need to figure this out before I can make a decision. Figure what out exactly? How to abandon your daughter for a career opportunity. The anger in Sarah's voice hit Marcus like a slap. That's not what this is, Sarah. This is about building a future where I can actually provide for her properly. She doesn't need you to provide for her, Marcus. She needs you to be her father. She needs you to be present in her life, not sending postcards from Amsterdam. Marcus felt his own anger rising. And what have I been able to provide from Detroit? Child support payments that are late half the time because I'm working for $12 an hour? Birthday presents from the discount store because that's all I can afford? A father who's too tired to be fully present during our weekend visits? At least you're her father who's trying, who's here, who shows up.
Barely, Sarah. I barely show up, and we both know it.
The hurt in his own voice surprised Marcus. He hadn't realized how much his financial limitations had been weighing on him, how inadequate he'd felt as a provider for his daughter. Sarah's voice softened slightly. Marcus, I know you're doing your best, but running away to Amsterdam isn't the answer. What if it's not running away? What if it's running towards something better? This job comes with benefits, Sarah. Real health insurance. A salary that would let me actually save for Elias' college fund. And Amsterdam has excellent schools.
Some of the best international education programs in the world.
Are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything yet.
I'm just saying that maybe there are ways to make this work that we haven't thought of. There was movement on Sarah's end of the phone, and Marcus heard her footsteps on hardwood floors. She was probably pacing in her kitchen, the way she always did when she was thinking through a difficult problem. David and I have built a life here, she said finally. He has his job, his family is here. Aaliyah has friends, she's doing well in school. Her whole support system is in Chicago. I know that. I'm not asking you to uproot everything, but maybe we could work out some kind of arrangement. Summer vacations, school breaks. The company mentioned helping with family situations for international assignments. Marcus, be realistic. You're talking about seeing your daughter a few times a year, instead of every other weekend. How is that better for her? The question hung in the air, and Marcus realized he didn't have a good answer. How could he explain that this felt like his one chance to break out of the cycle of financial struggle that had defined his adult life? How could he make Sarah understand that turning down this opportunity might mean never getting another one like it? Can I talk to her? Marcus asked. Can I explain what's happening? She's 8 years old, Marcus. What are you going to explain? That daddy got a fancy new job, but it means moving to another continent. She's smart, Sarah. She understands more than we give her credit for. Another pause, then Sarah's footsteps again. Alia, can you come here for a minute? Your dad wants to talk to you. Marcus heard Aaliyah's voice in the background asking if everything was okay. Heard Sarah reassuring her that it was just grown-up stuff they needed to discuss. Hi, Daddy. How come you're calling tonight? The pure joy in his daughter's voice almost broke Marcus's resolve. How could he even consider moving thousands of miles away from that voice? Hi, sweetheart. I wanted to tell you about something exciting that happened to me at work. Did you get to use your Dutch again? Actually, yes. And because I was able to help some important business people, they offered me a new job using my languages. That's so cool! Are you going to be like a translator? Something like that. I'd be helping American companies work with companies in other countries, especially in the Netherlands. Where you've been studying Dutch. That's perfect, Daddy. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes at his daughter's enthusiasm.
There's just one thing, sweetheart. The job would be in Amsterdam, which is in the Netherlands.
That's very far from Chicago. There was a pause as Aaliyah processed this information. How far? It takes an airplane about 8 hours to get there. Oh, another pause. Would you be gone for a long time? Marcus glanced at the folder on his passenger seat, at the contract terms that spelled out a 2-year minimum commitment. At least 2 years, sweetheart. Maybe longer. 2 years? Aaliyah's voice got smaller. That's a really long time, Daddy. I know it is, baby. That's why I'm not sure what to do. I want to take this job because it could help me build a better future for both of us. But I don't want to be so far away from you. Could I visit you? In Amsterdam? Marcus felt a spark of hope. Would you want to? Yeah. I could practice the Dutch words you teach me. And I could see where you work and meet the people you help. Sarah's voice came back on the line. She must have taken the phone from Aaliyah. Don't get her hopes up about things that might not be possible, Marcus. Why wouldn't it be possible? She could spend summers there, spring breaks. Kids travel internationally all the time. Kids with 2 parents who can afford international travel and who agree on custody arrangements. Kids whose fathers aren't chasing dreams on another continent. The bitterness in Sarah's voice cut deep, but Marcus forced himself to stay calm. What if this isn't about chasing dreams? What if this is about finally being able to participate in her future in a meaningful way? College tuition, study abroad programs, graduate school. This job could make all of that possible. She's 8, Marcus. She needs a father now, not a college fund. She needs both, Sarah. And right now, I can barely provide either one. Marcus heard Sarah sigh deeply, the sound of a woman trying to balance her protective instincts with the recognition that her ex-husband was facing a genuinely difficult decision. How long do you have to decide? She asked. A week? And you'd start when? The position opens up in 3 months. They want me to do some intensive training first. 3 months. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Marcus, I need you to really think about this. Not just about the money and the career advancement, but about what kind of father you want to be. Alia already struggles with feeling abandoned by your work schedule and the distance between Detroit and Chicago. How do you think she'll handle you being on another continent?
The question hit Marcus harder than he'd expected.
He thought about their weekly phone calls, how much he looked forward to them, and how devastated he felt when work conflicts sometimes forced him to miss them. He thought about the disappointment in Aaliyah's voice when he had to cancel a weekend visit because he couldn't afford the gas money or because his work schedule had changed. But he also thought about the pride in her voice when she talked about his language skills, about her excitement when he'd told her about helping with the Dutch documents. She was old enough to understand that her father was working towards something better, even if she was too young to fully grasp what that might mean for their relationship. Sarah, what if I don't take this job? What if I stay in Detroit, keep working nights, keep struggling to make ends meet? What kind of father does that make me? What kind of example am I setting for her about pursuing your dreams and using your talents? You'd be the father who put his daughter first, or the father who was too afraid to take a risk that could benefit both of us in the long run. They talked for another hour, going in circles around the same fundamental questions. Could Marcus be a good father from Amsterdam? Could he build a meaningful relationship with Aaliyah through visits and video calls and summer vacations? Would the financial stability and career growth be worth the sacrifice in day-to-day presence? By the time they hung up, nothing had been resolved, but Marcus felt like he understood the stakes more clearly. This wasn't just a career decision. It was a choice about what kind of life he wanted to build and what kind of father he wanted to be. That night, Marcus called his mother again. I talked to Sarah, he said without preamble when Dorothy answered. I figured you would. How'd that go? About as well as you'd expect. She thinks I'm abandoning my responsibilities. What do you think? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching traffic lights change on the street below his apartment window. I think I'm terrified of making the wrong choice. If I take this job and it damages my relationship with Aaliyah, I'll never forgive myself. But if I don't take it and spend the rest of my life wondering what could have been, baby, let me tell you something about parenting, Dorothy said. There's no such thing as a perfect choice. Every decision we make for our children involves trade-offs. The question isn't whether you'll make mistakes, the question is whether you'll make them out of love or out of fear. What do you mean? I mean, are you considering this job because you love Aaliyah and want to build something better for her future, or are you considering it because you're running away from the difficulties of being a father under your current circumstances? Marcus thought about this. Both, maybe. I do want to provide better for her, but I'm also tired of feeling like a failure every time I have to cancel a visit or show up to her school events in my janitor uniform. There's nothing wrong with wanting better for yourself and your child, Marcus, but you need to be honest about your motivations. And you need to think carefully about whether this opportunity is really about building something better or just about escaping something difficult. After they hung up, Marcus sat in his darkened apartment, the folder from Henderson Global spread out on his kitchen table. The salary figures looked like lottery numbers, more money than he'd ever imagined making. The job description read like a dream come true: international travel, using his language skills, working with smart, successful people who valued his contributions. But across the top of every page he kept seeing Aaliyah's face, hearing her small voice asking if 2 years was really a long time. Marcus picked up his Dutch textbook, the same one he'd been studying from for 3 years. On the inside cover, in faded ballpoint pen, he'd written his goals when he first started learning the language: for Aaliyah's future, for our dreams. He'd written those words during one of the darkest periods of his life, when his marriage was falling apart and he felt like he was failing at everything that mattered. Learning Dutch had been an act of hope, a way of investing in possibilities he couldn't yet see. Now those possibilities had materialized into a concrete offer that could change everything. The question was whether pursuing them would honor the intention behind those written words or betray it. Marcus closed the textbook and looked around his small apartment, the second-hand furniture, the stack of bills on the counter, the photo of Aaliyah on the refrigerator, that reminded him every day of what he was working toward. He had 4 more days to make the most important decision of his life. 4 days to figure out whether love meant staying close or meant taking the risk to build something better from far away. 4 days to decide whether Marcus Thompson the dreamer could become Marcus Thompson the father, who had the courage to reach for the future his daughter deserved. Friday morning brought an unexpected phone call that would change Marcus's entire perspective on his decision. He was eating breakfast before his shift, still wrestling with the choice between Amsterdam and staying in Detroit, when his phone rang. The caller ID showed a Chicago number he didn't recognize. "Hello, Mr. Dow. Thompson? This is Jennifer Walsh from Lincoln Elementary School. I'm Aaliyah's teacher." Marcus's heart immediately jumped to panic mode. "Is Aaliyah okay? Did something happen?" "Oh, no, she's fine. I'm sorry to worry you. I'm actually calling because Aaliyah asked me to. She wanted me to talk to you about something she calls your Amsterdam decision." Despite his nervousness, Marcus smiled. His daughter's take-charge attitude reminded him of his mother. "She asked you to call me?" "She did, Mr. Bear." "Thompson, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but Aaliyah talks about you a lot in class. She's very proud of the fact that you speak multiple languages, and she often mentions how hard you work to learn new things." Marcus felt a warmth spreading through his chest. "She talks about me? Constantly. And yesterday, when she told the class that her father might get to use his Dutch skills for a real job in Amsterdam, you should have seen how excited she was. But then she got quiet, and I could tell something was bothering her."
Did she say what?
"She's worried that if you don't take this job, it might be because of her. She asked me to call and tell you that she thinks you should take it, even if it means being far away." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "She said that. She's a very wise little girl, Mr. Barr Thompson. She told me, my daddy has been studying so hard for so long, and now someone wants to pay him to use what he learned. If he doesn't take it because of me, I'll feel bad forever." Marcus had to set down his coffee cup because his hands were shaking. "Ms. Walsh, can I ask you something? As someone who sees a lot of kids and families, what do you think is best for her?" There was a thoughtful pause before the teacher answered. "Mr. Thompson, I've been teaching for 15 years, and I've seen all kinds of family situations. What I've learned is that children are remarkably resilient when they feel loved and supported. Aaliyah knows you love her. That comes through in everything she says about you. The question isn't whether you should sacrifice your future for her or vice versa. The question is how you can pursue your dreams in a way that includes her and makes her part of your success story." "What do you mean?" "I mean, she's already part of this story, isn't she? Your motivation for learning Dutch in the first place was to build a better future for both of you. She's been cheering you on through your studies. She's proud of your skills. Taking this job doesn't separate her from your dreams. It validates them."
After the call ended, Marcus sat staring at his phone for a long time.
He'd been thinking about the Amsterdam opportunity as a choice between his career and his daughter. But what if it was actually a choice between fear and faith? Between playing it safe and believing that love could survive distance and change? That evening, Marcus made another call that had been weighing on his mind. He dialed David's number in Chicago. "Marcus, is everything okay?" David's voice was cautious but not unfriendly. Their relationship had always been cordial, built on mutual respect for each other's roles in Aaliyah's life. "I need to ask you something, David, and I need you to be honest with me." "Okay. If I take this job in Amsterdam, would you help make sure Aaliyah gets to visit me?" I know it's a lot to ask, and I know the travel costs would be significant, but this job would finally put me in a position to cover those expenses. David was quiet for a moment. Marcus, Sarah told me about the offer. Can I be frank with you, please? I think you should take it. Marcus was stunned. You do? Look, I love Aaliyah like she's my own daughter. I want what's best for her. And what's best for her is having a father who believes in himself and pursues his potential. She needs to see that dreams are achievable, that hard work pays off, that taking calculated risks can lead to extraordinary outcomes. David paused, and Marcus could hear him moving around what sounded like his home office. I've been successful in my career, Marcus. I can provide stability and security for Aaliyah and Sarah. But you know what I can't provide. I can't show her what it looks like to overcome significant obstacles through determination and self-education. I can't demonstrate the courage it takes to bet on yourself when the stakes are high. But what about the practical aspects? The distance? The visits? We'll figure it out. Sarah and I have discussed it, and we're prepared to support whatever decision you make.
If that means facilitating international visits, helping with travel logistics, even considering spending part of summers in Amsterdam, we'll make it work.
Marcus felt something shift inside his chest, like a knot he hadn't realized was there suddenly loosening.
David, why are you supporting this? I mean, wouldn't it be easier for you and Sarah if I just stayed put? David laughed softly. Marcus, you're Aaliyah's father. That's never going to change, no matter where you live or what you do for work. But right now, you're an underemployed father who struggles to make ends meet. This opportunity could make you a successful, confident father who can contribute meaningfully to her future. Which version do you think serves her better? Saturday afternoon, Marcus drove to his mother's house in Cleveland. He needed to talk through his decision in person, needed to see Dorothy's face when she gave him advice that might change the course of his life. He found her in her garden planting flowers for spring. At 62, she was still strong and energetic, her hands sure and gentle as she worked with the soil. She'd raised 3 sons and worked 2 jobs for most of Marcus's childhood, and she'd never once complained about the sacrifices required. I wondered when you'd show up, she said without looking up from her planting. You always come here when you need to think through something big. Marcus sat down on the porch steps, watching his mother work. Mom, I keep going back and forth. One minute I'm convinced I should take the job, the next minute I think I'm being selfish. Dorothy sat back on her heels and looked at her son. Marcus, what did you dream about when you first started learning Dutch? I don't know. I guess I thought maybe someday I could use it professionally, travel, see the world. And what do you dream about now? Marcus thought about this. I dream about Aaliyah being proud of me. I dream about being able to pay for her college without her having to take out loans. I dream about taking her to Amsterdam and showing her the places where I work, the people I help. I dream about her seeing that her father became something more than she ever expected. Dorothy smiled and brushed dirt off her hands. Then what's the problem? The problem is that pursuing those dreams means spending less time with her in the short term. Baby, let me tell you something about parenting. The greatest gift you can give your child isn't your constant presence. It's showing them what's possible when someone believes in themselves and works toward their potential. She stood up and joined Marcus on the porch steps. When you were 8 years old, you used to tell me you wanted to be an astronaut. You know what I didn't do? I didn't tell you that astronauts came from families with money and connections. I didn't tell you to be realistic and settle for something easier. I told you to study hard and reach for the stars. But I didn't become an astronaut. No, but you became a man who teaches himself languages and gets offered international business positions. You became a man who doesn't give up on his dreams even when life gets difficult. And now you have a chance to show Aaliyah what that kind of determination can achieve. Dorothy reached over and took Marcus's hand. Your daddy left us when things got hard. He chose the easy path over the difficult one. You have a chance to show Aaliyah what it looks like when a father chooses courage over comfort, when he bets on his family's future instead of settling for safety. What if I fail? What if I get to Amsterdam and I'm not good enough? Then you'll learn and you'll grow and you'll become good enough. Marcus, you've been preparing for this your whole life. All those nights studying when you were exhausted, all those hours practicing languages when you could have been watching TV. That was you investing in this moment. Sunday evening, Marcus video called Aaliyah for their weekly conversation. She was in her bedroom in Chicago, homework spread out on her desk, looking older than her 8 years as she talked about school and friends and her week. Daddy, have you decided about Amsterdam? Marcus took a deep breath. Actually, sweetheart, I wanted to talk to you about that. What would you think if I told you I was going to take the job? Alia's face lit up with excitement. Really? You're going to use your Dutch for real work? I am.
But that means I'll be living very far away for a while.
I know. But Daddy, you've been studying so hard for so long.
And now someone wants to pay you lots of money to use what you learned. That's like a dream coming true. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. It is like a dream coming true. But I want you to know that even though I'll be far away, you'll still be the most important thing in my life. And we'll talk all the time, and you'll come visit me, and I'll show you Amsterdam and teach you Dutch words. Can I really visit you there? Absolutely. Mum and David have already said they'll help arrange visits. And maybe, if you like it, you could even spend whole summers with me. Alia clapped her hands together. I could learn Dutch from Dutch people. And see the tulips and the windmills. All of that and more, sweetheart. Daddy, I'm proud of you for taking the job. It means you're brave. Marcus had to turn away from the camera for a moment to compose himself. When he turned back, Alia was looking at him with the same expression of love and confidence that had carried him through every difficult moment of the past few years. I love you, Alia. More than anything in the world. I love you too, Daddy. And I can't wait to visit you in your new job. Monday morning, Marcus called Victoria Henderson and accepted the position with Henderson Global Investments. Marcus, I'm delighted, Victoria said. I knew this was the right decision for both of us. When can you start the training program? As soon as you need me to. Excellent. Oh, and Marcus? I want you to know that your story, your dedication to self-improvement, your willingness to take risks for your family's future, that's exactly the kind of character we value at this company. You're going to do extraordinary things here. As Marcus hung up the phone, he realized that he felt different than he had just a week ago. The scared, uncertain janitor who'd knocked on a conference room door had been replaced by someone new. Someone who believed in his own potential and had the courage to pursue it. He thought about Alia's excitement, about David's unexpected support, about his mother's wisdom, about Ms. Walsh's observation that children need to see their parents pursue their dreams. For the first time in his adult life, Marcus Thompson felt like the author of his own story rather than just a character reacting to circumstances. The man looking back at him in the mirror was someone who'd recognized an opportunity, evaluated it carefully, and made a choice based on love rather than fear. Amsterdam was waiting, full of possibilities he'd never dared to imagine. And for the first time, Marcus felt ready for whatever came next. 3 months later, as he boarded a plane bound for the Netherlands, Marcus carried with him a photo of Alia and a Dutch phrasebook filled with notes in his careful handwriting. But more importantly, he carried the knowledge that sometimes the greatest act of love is having the courage to become the person your child needs you to be. The janitor who'd answered a question in Dutch had evolved into something he'd never expected, a father brave enough to chase his dreams, not in spite of his love for his daughter, but because of it. 2 years later, Marcus Thompson stood in the arrivals hall of Amsterdam's Schiphol Airport, holding a sign that read Alia Thompson in both English and Dutch. His daughter was arriving for her second summer visit to Amsterdam, but this time was different. This time, she was coming to see her father receive a promotion that would make him Henderson Global's youngest regional director for European operations. The man waiting in the airport bore little resemblance to the night shift janitor, who had once cleaned these same halls during a brief training assignment. Marcus now wore a tailored suit that fit perfectly, spoke Dutch with increasing fluency, and carried himself with the confidence of someone who had not just survived a major life transition, but thrived in it. As passengers began streaming through the customs doors, Marcus spotted Alia immediately. At 10 years old, she was tall for her age, with bright, curious eyes that reminded him of his mother. She was wearing a t-shirt that said Amsterdam in Dutch colors, and she was scanning the crowd with the confidence of a seasoned international traveler. "Daddy!" she called out when she saw him, breaking into a run that sent her rolling suitcase bumping behind her. Marcus swept her into a hug that lifted her off the ground, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo and feeling the solid reality of his daughter in his arms after 6 months of video calls and text messages. "Look at you, kidding around in Amsterdam like you own the place," Marcus said, switching to Dutch. "Hoe gaat het met je? How are you doing?" "Heel good, dankjewel," Alia replied with only a slight accent. "Very well, thank you. I've been practicing with the Dutch tutor Mom found for me. I can order food and ask for directions and everything." As they walked through the airport toward the train that would take them into the city, Alia chatted excitedly about her flight, her school year, her friends back in Chicago, and her expectations for this summer in Amsterdam. But Marcus could sense something else underneath her enthusiasm. a maturity that hadn't been there during her first visit the previous summer. "Daddy, can I ask you something?" she said as they settled into their seats on the train.
"Anything, sweetheart. Do you ever regret taking this job? I mean, do you miss being able to see me all the time?" The question caught Marcus off guard, not because he hadn't thought about it, but because he was surprised by his daughter's directness.
"That's a pretty serious question, Aaliyah. What makes you ask?" "Some kids at school said that if my dad really loved me, he wouldn't have moved so far away. And sometimes I wonder if they're right." Marcus felt his heart clench. He'd worried about this constantly during his first year in Amsterdam, whether his decision to pursue this opportunity had been selfish, whether he was failing his daughter by choosing career advancement over daily presence. "Can I tell you something that might sound strange?" Marcus said, taking his daughter's hand. "Moving to Amsterdam made me love you more, not less." Aaliyah looked confused. "How does that work?" "When I was working as a janitor in Detroit, I was so tired all the time, so worried about money, so frustrated with my life that I wasn't really present even when we were together. Do you remember how stressed I used to get about little things? How I'd sometimes snap at you when I was really just angry at my situation?" Aaliyah nodded slowly. "Here in Amsterdam, I'm doing work that challenges me and excites me. I'm using my brain and my language skills every day. I'm working with smart, interesting people who respect what I bring to the team. When we talk on the phone or video chat, I'm fully present because I'm not carrying around all that frustration and worry." Marcus pointed out the window as the train sped past Dutch countryside dotted with windmills and canals. "And look what this decision has given us. You're having experiences that most 10-year-olds never get to have. You're learning a second language fluently. You're seeing the world. You're watching your father build something meaningful. But don't you miss me when I'm not here?" "Every single day," Marcus said without hesitation. "But here's what I've learned, sweetheart. Missing someone you love isn't necessarily a bad thing. It reminds you how precious they are. It makes the time you do spend together more intentional and special." Aaliyah was quiet for a moment, processing this. "Mrs. Peterson, my teacher, she said that some of the most loving parents she knows are the ones who show their kids that it's okay to take risks and chase your dreams." Marcus smiled. "Mrs. Kruger, Peterson sounds like a smart woman." "She is. She said that watching your dad become successful teaches you things that can't be learned any other way." As the train pulled into Amsterdam's central station, Marcus felt a familiar surge of pride at the sight of the city he'd come to call home. The historic buildings, the canals lined with narrow houses, the mix of old-world charm and modern innovation, all of it had become as familiar to him as the Detroit neighborhoods where he'd grown up. But today was special not just because Aaliyah was visiting, but because of what they were going to do that evening. Marcus had planned a surprise that represented everything his journey from janitor to international business executive had made possible. That afternoon, after they'd settled into Marcus's apartment, a comfortable 2-bedroom place overlooking one of Amsterdam's famous canals, he took Aaliyah to the Henderson Global offices for a tour. The building was modern and sleek, all glass and steel, and carefully designed spaces that spoke of success and sophistication. But as they walked through the hallways, Marcus found himself remembering another building, another time when he'd felt intimidated by the obvious wealth and power surrounding him. "This is where I work," Marcus said as they entered his office on the 15th floor. The space was larger than his entire Detroit apartment had been, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Amstel River. Aaliyah walked around the office, examining the certificates on the walls, the photos from business trips to Germany and France, the Dutch-English dictionary that sat prominently on his desk even though he rarely needed it anymore. "Daddy, this is like a movie or something. I can't believe this is really your office." "Sometimes I can't believe it either," Marcus admitted. Victoria Henderson appeared in the doorway, exactly on schedule. At 53, she looked much the same as she had that night in Detroit when she'd first recognized Marcus's potential, though her hair was now completely silver, and she carried herself with the additional authority of someone who had just been named CEO of Henderson Global's entire European division. "You must be Aaliyah," Victoria said, extending her hand with the same professional warmth Marcus remembered from their first meeting. "I'm Victoria Henderson. I've heard so much about you." "You're the lady who gave my daddy his job," Aaliyah said, shaking Victoria's hand enthusiastically. "Actually, your father earned this job." "I just recognized what was already there." Victoria turned to Marcus. "Are you ready for tonight's ceremony?" "As ready as I'll ever be." Victoria smiled and looked at Aaliyah. "Did your father tell you what's happening tonight?" Aaliyah shook her head, looking curious. "Your father is being promoted to Regional Director for European Operations, At 34, he'll be the youngest person ever to hold that position at Henderson Global. Aaliyah's eyes went wide. Daddy, you didn't tell me it was such a big deal. Marcus felt his cheeks warm. I didn't want to make too big a thing out of it. Marcus, Victoria said with a laugh. You're going to be managing a team of 40 people across 8 countries. You'll be responsible for over $2 billion in international investments. I think it qualifies as a big deal. That evening, the promotion ceremony was held in the ballroom of one of Amsterdam's most prestigious hotels. Marcus had never attended anything so elegant. Waiters in white gloves serving champagne and elaborate hors d'oeuvres, live classical music, flowers arrangements that probably cost more than his old monthly salary. Aaliyah sat at the head table between Marcus and Victoria, wearing a navy blue dress that Sarah had bought especially for the occasion. She seemed completely comfortable in the sophisticated environment, chatting with international business executives in both English and Dutch, asking intelligent questions about their work and their countries. Watching his daughter navigate this world with such confidence filled Marcus with a pride that went beyond his own professional achievements. This was what his decision had really been about, showing Aaliyah that transformation was possible, that ordinary people could achieve extraordinary things through determination and courage. When Victoria called Marcus to the podium to speak, he looked out at the room full of successful, accomplished people and thought about the journey that had brought him here. The late night studying Dutch grammar while working double shifts, the fear and uncertainty of accepting the original position, the lonely months of adaptation as he learned to navigate a new culture and business environment. 2.5 years ago, Marcus began. I was working as a night shift janitor in Detroit. I had dreams of using my language skills professionally, but they felt impossible. I was a single father struggling to make ends meet, convinced that people like me didn't get opportunities like this. He paused and looked at Aaliyah, who was watching him with absolute attention and pride. The night I met Victoria Henderson, I was cleaning the conference room, where she was struggling with Dutch legal documents. I had a choice. I could stay invisible, keep pushing my mop cart, and continue dreaming about a different future. Or I could knock on that door and offer to help. Marcus smiled at the memory. I knocked. And that decision didn't just change my career, it changed how I see myself and what I believe is possible. He talked about the challenges of the transition, the steep learning curve of international business, the difficulty of being so far from Aaliyah during the adjustment period, but he also talked about the rewards, not just the financial compensation, but the satisfaction of using his talents meaningfully, the confidence that came from succeeding in a demanding environment, the relationships he'd built with colleagues from around the world. My daughter Aaliyah is here tonight, Marcus said, gesturing toward her table. She's 10 years old, and she's already traveled internationally more than I did in my first 30 years of life. She speaks 2 languages fluently and is working on a 3rd. She's seen her father transform his life through education and determination. Alia beamed and waved at the room, completely unintimidated by the attention. But the most important thing she's learned is that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things when they're willing to work hard and take calculated risks. That dreams aren't just for other people. They're for anyone brave enough to pursue them. Marcus paused, feeling emotional as he looked around the room. I want to thank Victoria Henderson and the entire Henderson Global team for taking a chance on a janitor with language skills and a lot of determination. But mostly, I want to thank them for showing me that sometimes the biggest risk isn't taking a chance on an uncertain opportunity. It's settling for a life that doesn't challenge you to become who you're capable of being. The applause was long and enthusiastic. As Marcus returned to his seat, Aaliyah leaned over and whispered in his ear, Daddy, I'm proud of you, and I'm glad you knocked on that door. Later that night, after the ceremony and the reception, Marcus and Aaliyah walked along the canals near his apartment. The Amsterdam night was mild and peaceful, with lights from the narrow houses reflecting in the dark water. Daddy, can I tell you something? Aaliyah said as they stopped on a small bridge to watch boats pass underneath. Of course. I used to be scared that taking this job meant you loved your work more than you loved me. But now I understand that taking this job was how you showed me that you loved me. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. What do you mean? You wanted to build a better life for both of us, and you wanted to show me that people like us, people who don't start out with lots of money or connections, we can still achieve amazing things if we don't give up. Aaliyah leaned against the bridge railing, looking thoughtful. Mum told me that some parents show their love by always staying close and playing it safe. But you showed your love by being brave and working hard, and believing that our future could be better than our past. Marcus put his arm around his daughter's shoulders, marveling at her,